Hello, my name is Koing Nguyen, and I am going to be doing an analysis on the use of oil and pastel by Impressionist artists, primarily Claude Monet and Edgar Degas, for my final project of Art 155F. Topics I will be focusing on are the analyses of San Giorgio Maggiore at dusk and L'Etoile, and I will be focusing on specific techniques and how they use their medium. I will then relate this to the Impressionist movement and explain some connections that connect these two artworks and artists together. The first artwork is San Giorgio Maggiore at dusk, which depicts a sunset view of the island of San Giorgio Maggiore and its church. Like many of his paintings, this is not the only version of this subject, but one of many, as Monet liked to capture the same scene but in different lightings and moods. For context, this is one of 37 paintings that Monet began when he visited Venice in 1908. He used oil on canvas to capture what he saw as he admired the city and wanted to capture the feelings he felt. As an overall composition, Monet is able to capture the light and shadows, although it is not necessarily realistic. The representation is instead able to evoke emotion through his depiction of light and movement that is reflected in the sky and the water. Monet's use of color and light is incredible, as he uses only 3 colors in his painting. He rejected black and earth tones, which left him with bright, vibrant colors. Using primarily 3 colors, he was able to create a scene that shows the beauty he saw through the juxtaposition of light and shadow rather than the accurate representation of color. Here, the silhouette of the church can be seen to be a mixture of colors that are blended rather than just complete black. Monet stopped using black paint after 1886, which led to the unique Impressionist style of using small strokes of color that combine and look dark from a distance. Now, when we focus on the water, the use of small strokes creates enough variance to mimic ripples in the water and light from the sunset. When looking closely, these small strokes are independent, but from a distance, these strokes visually blend together to create a holistic Impressionist style. This piece is titled L'Etoile by Edgar Degas, which translates to the star, and was painted using pastel. The main subject is a lone ballerina, which follows Degas's main subject matter of dancers in his other artworks. The ballerina is in a graceful pose, showing a happiness and satisfaction that is indicative of the bourgeoisie lifestyle that Impressionists tended to capture. Degas analogizes the ballerina to a star, which is a symbol of perfection and purity. However, Degas's purpose in painting dancers is not only the expression of joy. The representation of the bourgeoisie is joyous by the depiction of the ballerina, but has a dark undertone when the background is analyzed. Some patrons would force themselves on these dancers, which is represented by the stark figure with his face obscured. The curtains are chaotic and earth-toned, which contrasts the bright, organized strokes of the ballerina. Taking a closer look at the strokes, they differ from Monet's in that they are thinner and longer, with strokes that are blended. Pigments are able to be seen overlapping, and the strokes differ in size and orientation. So, how does this relate to Impressionism? Impressionism is characterized by capturing the feelings in a moment, typically in the life of a middle class. This can be seen in both art pieces showing the beauty and shortcomings of the bourgeoisie. One of the major themes to capture these moments is the emphasis of color and light, which is emphasized by the techniques used to achieve this. Both Monet and Degas put importance on their choice of color and usage of color. Monet used complementary colors and restrictions on his colors to create unique art pieces that conveyed the emotions he felt. Degas's use of earthy tones created a style in which he created high contrast between shadow and light, making the focal point and his subject stand out. In addition to this emphasis on color and light, the strokes that Impressionist artists used made their artwork stand out. Monet's use of oil paints typically gave small patches of defined color that visually blended when it was viewed from far away. Degas also used broad strokes, but used thin lines within those broad strokes to create chaos and change the way the movement felt in his art. His medium of pastel meant that colors were more likely to be mixed and in a gradient, rather than the defined strokes from Monet. Both artists used a loose rendering to capture the general feeling of a scene rather than the small details. Monet's art, however, is more indicative of this theme, as Degas was more traditionalist in his art, giving a couple more fine details in his artwork. Another reason for this lack of detail and focus on emotion of a scene was how Monet and Degas perceived the world, both literally and figuratively. To focus on the literal component, both Monet and Degas suffered from eye complications. An aging Monet consulted several ophthalmologists as he was unhappy with many of his works where he could not accurately define color. Degas suffered eye problems when he was young, and the loss of eyesight in his left eye when he was 36. There is no definite proof that eye problems had a huge impact on Monet, Degas, and Impressionism, but it is an interesting conjecture that the reason Monet used oil and broad strokes, and the reason Degas turned to pastel with chaotic lines was because the different way they perceived the world due to their ocular anomalies, which may have ultimately influenced the Impressionist movement. Overall, Monet and Degas used different mediums, but with similar techniques to express the life of the bourgeoisie.